Hello, my name is Chris Blask. I'm the Vice President of Strategy with Cybeats. And with me today is Cassie Crossley. Cassie, how the hell are you?
I am great, Chris. How you doing?
I'm good. I think that's a acceptable word to use these days, anyways. But so, where in the world are you?
I am in San Jose, East San Jose, so in the San Francisco Bay Area of California.
Silicon Valley. Now, is that we were just talking past and so forth? And we've gotten to know each other really well, I think, over the last couple of years. But I don't really know if we've talked past. So, are you a native Californian, or how did you get there?
Ironically, I was actually born in San Jose. My dad worked in the Silicon Valley in '69, so now I'm divulging my age. Yes, but we moved when I was 6 months old. He then moved to Florida. He moved all around with IBM, Minnesota, Kentucky, and then I was in Atlanta for 25 years. So I consider myself just generally from Atlanta, but I've been in California for 14 years now. So I do consider myself officially a Californian, born and not raised, though.
Well, it's funny we have that in common. I was born in Stockton, California, but I moved when I was
Yes.
one to Colorado, and yeah, the only times I hear Stockton on the news during my life is usually not good news, right? But
Right.
yeah, and yeah, I lived in Scotts Valley not too long in the last decade or so, right? Yeah, Silicon Valley is what it is, right? It's
It
funny,
is.
right? As a kind of expat Silicon Valley person, that gives you an extra perspective on it, right?
It
And after,
does.
yeah, and after this much time too, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
so
When you go
yeah,
through the computer museum here in the valley and see things that my dad helped build and design and work on, and all the way to the point that it had one of my products, because I worked for McAfee when we released VirusScan 95, and there's a picture of the box that my team designed for that. So I'm in the computer museum. It's pretty ironic that generationally I've got two generations in my family that have stuff there.
that's fascinating by itself. And what on this podcast and other shows and so forth, Fred Coleman and I have been doing a thing on NBC out in Silicon Valley recently. We have enough experience. It's interesting just the story itself, right? And to our purpose here, we've talked 40 something episodes. And Anthony, if you put it in chat, I think this is 43 or 2 or something like that. Maybe this is the Answer to Life, the Universe, and Everything show. But back in the day, open source and standards, IP and so forth in the early internet, this was not believed, right? There was
Right.
a lot of winking and nod believing. Oh yeah, we'll do open source. However, right, we'll keep everything closed sourced, or we'll get involved in standards. However, right, we'll make sure they're geared towards us. And here we both are, right? Representing corporations, through our careers, done all sorts of things. And as we're discussing in the green room, I believe more than ever that transparency, doing the right thing, and so forth, as a company and as a professional, is profitable. It costs less. It's more efficient. It's good capitalism. It's not just hippie. We'll all get along and we'll all share our code. We'll be really clear about what we're going to do and track that. And you and I, in the middle of this whole software, bill of materials, supply chain stuff, right? Gearing that. Makes me look at, as we do on the show, looking back where we are right now. So looking all the way back, Anthony, if you'd roll that first one, did we know what we needed? Or as you're saying, literally a Silicon Valley native, second
Yeah.
generation. Was it easier? Was transparency, clarity? Was it easier buying? Was it easier in Silicon Valley back then than now, or how's it evolved? Do you think?
Yeah. So I think that first off, I could say my first commercial lines of code, by the way, were in a product that we sold to Microsoft. So if you look at a Windows system, you'll see two versions of Paint. I helped write lines of code for paint.exe. And
That's right.
we did not have open source. We did not have, I mean, it was just our own blood, sweat, and tears. At that time, every line of code was written from scratch. And I can tell you that there was no provenance, no information stored. We had no check-in, right? We were modifying files and VI, on the system as we made updates. The only way you would know if somebody's line of code is if we commented it. Um, And so, yeah, did we know what we needed then? No. Did it matter? That I didn't even have the same last name then. So how are we going to consider code that's been written decades ago that we're still using every day? Because we don't deprecate, we do a poor job as a community, as a development community, deprecating and removing unused lines of code. I use as an example, if you have just even a selection box, yes, no, or maybe, and you decide to get rid of the maybe option, do you ever delete the lines of code from the maybe? No, you leave it in there because you might want to use it one day. So there's lines of code in everything we're building that are never run through. So I don't think we knew what we know now, that essentially every byte could, we need to make sure we keep it secure, that the integrity remains. And do we really need that? So I think that we've learned a lot. And even with open source, I mean, if you pull down an open source package, this is a great function. Let's pull this into my project. I can copy and paste it. Then we're not actually capturing the provenance. We all go to different forums. Oh, that's how you can, resolve this problem I have. I'm going to copy and paste it. There's no provenance. So I think that we have a lot of education to do with development teams. A lot of how do we capture that? We have to worry now about code generator from ChatGPT and other AI modules. How are we going to reference those? So I think we're just at the beginning of this software transparency. It's a hard problem. If you're looking at 8 bits, 1 byte, whatever, do we need to go to that level of provenance? And I'm not sure. Is it complicated? It's extremely complicated. So I like that we're looking at it from, let's just start with the basics, the crawl, walk, run that we talk about. Do we at least know who built this? And you can't even say might be where they were located. Cassie could be in Iowa one day. Cassie could be, in Paris the next day. But what's her affiliation? So we've got a long way to go. So let's just start with Schneider Electric built this line of, built this product. Here's the reference, and go from there. And we'll go deeper and deeper as the tools progress, as education happens, as we learn more about where we want to identify the risks, because there's a unspoken kind of information that's in provenance where it's, there's concerns about country of origin. And, I'm American, but you don't know my affiliations. I'm American. So, but I know, Chris, you're Canadian, right? So
no, I'm American.
You're American now.
I've always been American.
Oh, okay.
I've lived back and forth. Yeah, a lot of people think I'm Canadian. My
Okay.
wife and my children are Canadian, but yes, I'm actually just American.
Okay. So, I mean, but that's a provenance of ourselves, right? It's very difficult. How are we going to capture it for our software? And how are we going to provide that transparency? It's an interesting question that'll keep us busy for, I think, centuries.
Well, I think you touched on a couple of the points in exactly where I want to go with this, right? Because, no is sort of the answer. We didn't know enough. We didn't know, but we knew enough, right? In the end, we're the same thing. Where are we right now? We're getting deep into the details of saying, you can, if you want, say this person wrote the piece of code and it was handled internally, and we can put that in place right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not all in place. All is such a word, who knows, right? In the CISA SBOM sharing working group this week, right? We tried to start the, saying how many ways could you share an SBOM, right? And it just reminded me so much when Mehdi Antazari and I had the first, DBOM conversations, right? And it's like, how is this being done now? And the answer is all the above, like literally. Yes. Fax machines are alive and well today, faxing things in the supply chain at all sorts of levels, right? And so you could fax an SBOM, right? Print it out and fax it. That works. Carrier pigeon, attach it to a LinkedIn message, virtually anything. And I wonder about that one. You and I have discussed this for the last couple of years. maybe we hack our way past that. Maybe we don't need a full-blown attestation ecosystem, open source SMT-ish sort of thing. Maybe we can continue to just, maybe that's good enough, and if not, when exactly does that change? I don't know, right? So if Anthony, if you want to keep us on track a little bit and put up that second question, I would like to say I remember what Star Wars reference I was thinking of when I wrote this, but we're here right now, right? It seems to me, with all my embedded optimism, that we're going the right direction, and not just for this, transparency as a whole.
Yes.
You think I'm right? Is the momentum in the right way in general, or any specific way that you think's worth chewing on? SBOMs, a lot of concern about U.S. federal legislation about SBOMs and whether that'll help or hurt or whatnot. I keep saying it can hurt and it can help, but the cat's out of the bag. Horses are out of the stable or whatnot. I reference you a lot. It's like Schneider Electric is going down this path regardless,
right?
Because it's cheaper, better, faster, easier, saves money and time. Are we at that inflection?
I think we are at an inflection. I think that what was kept both in the back room, or the secret sauce, as of being made, we're not going to be able to stay that, even for products that have we have products that have encrypted firmware, which means somebody can't run it through its own binary analysis tool and be able to determine what open source components are. But we know that those, software that is not encrypted, people are starting to do that. So I think that visibility was there enough, and the security, those that were concerned about the security and the transparency, had tools that they would be either able to reverse engineer or run it through analysis tools. And we saw this happening, first, honestly, from different nation state actors decades ago, where they would reverse engineer to figure out how to break things. Well, now, we have customers who just want that information, which is great. Is it their job, or is it the manufacturer or the software publisher, or our job to provide that transparency? Because you are, you have to explain things. Why, for example, are certain libraries not up to the latest version? Well, it's very difficult to update and patch every single library if they're publishing updates in that open source project every quarter, but the product only releases once a year. You've got to do, especially in industrial control systems, we have very rigorous regression testing and safety testing. It's different than a mobile app, right?
Right.
So you have this concern from the development teams that have not had to provide that information. I was a developer. I totally understand. Somebody's, it's somebody's judging you without having the facts in some cases, because these analysis tools will bring up information. Not only is it just a list of vulnerabilities, but what's the risk associated with it? And so I think that, is the fourth force with us? Yes. It is clear that government and customers and everyone wants to have that transparency. They want to do it because they're the ones that are at risk, and they want to know literally, where do I need to put my attention? I can't put it on everything. And does that mean that the software publishers aren't responding to the level? We provide security notifications, we give that information, but we don't know, and we see this a lot in industrial controls. You don't know all of what's put in to that environment as mitigating controls, as compensating controls. We don't know their space. There's been big debates in CVSS for years about the environmental score, right? It's the situation. If you're building a product, a sensor that can be used in 17 different segments, including medical or wastewater, they all have different regulations. But what they really want is to be able to answer to their oversight, whoever's regulating them, what the risk is. And I think that this movement toward transparency helps them make that risk analysis. It's not going to be perfect at all because we don't know their specific situation, but they don't have any data points in some cases, and that's what they're looking for. So just the start.
Right. It wasn't perfect to begin with, right? And this, Anthony, roll that last question, because this just a recurring theme. I was young once too, right? And I got really angry at things I didn't understand. Why is it this way, and so forth. And then I kind of was one, right? Kind of over and over again, right? And the OT cybersecurity, right? It was the very early '90s when it first occurred to me, and I came from OT and I got into cybersecurity. I was presented with OT security, and I kind of freaked out, for a decade or so, and wasn't able to do anything about it, for rational reasons. And you touched on a couple of them, right? As a firewall vendor and then as a network vendor at Cisco, I had a fiduciary responsibility to people who invest in these companies, to make the most profit. That's what a company is. And if I take one engineer and stop them doing something that all of Wall Street wants to buy, containerfuls of firewalls to do this one really worthy thing, that's unethical. It's not good. Can't be done. It's irrational, right? And having to explain that over and over and over and over and over again to people, right? Blame the vendors. Okay, fine. You take that role in that company. You make that decision at that point in time. Now, later, yes. And you have to think about things like reputational risk, because in the early 90s, in 2000 and so forth, if you had said, there's a lot of openness in our personal lives. We don't say all the truths all the time. That's that's a mental health problem, right? We have to gauge how our transparency. But I think people are you said this. People are ready for this, right? And most of the problems I've seen in communicating these things were rational because there were concerns about the risk. But it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of energy, right? You maintain a lot of risk because the industry is just not ready to address it, even though you could. Or you spend a lot of effort and a lot of time trying to work through things when you can just get it over with. And a lot of my hope for the future is this rationality, right? It may look like, systems aren't working correctly, but if we can just where they are, where it's ethical, where it's good business, where it isn't corrupted, then transparency just helps, right? Yeah. So does this, looking forward, in short, right? In all these conversations with so many of our, you're my friends, right? We're talking all the time, and we sit down like this. It's kind of fun, but looking forward in any frame you like, where do you think this goes? Beyond supply chain, beyond cybersecurity, is it an intrinsic thing?
I think first off, it's an awareness topic. I think it's going to help us, as I mentioned earlier, improve our hygiene of our products and softwares and systems. I think that it will help drive modernization of things that were not happening. For example, when someone asks for a set of SBOMs, and some of those aren't even in support anymore, the products. Or when they ask for an SBOM, they apologize and say, I cannot, we're not running the latest version. So I think that it will drive, from a future standpoint, it will drive security, hygiene, secure by design, secure by default, but also just cleanliness and applicability of code. But it also drive customers and those that are running it to be more aware. Like, do I really need this tool? I mean, how many tools do you have deployed in an enterprise that 5 people may be using, which could bring a security risk if it's not being patched and maintained. So I think that this is all part, not just software transparency, but all part of a security hygiene.
Couldn't have said it better. I can't stop it. It's Alexa. It just does it regardless. It's one of those things. And well, I don't have the transparency, the settings to figure it out. It's not worth my bloody time, right? So, thank you for all of that. It's it's a pleasure working with you in the industry. It's so much fun to hack through these things and try to figure them out. And we definitely need to we will go sailing someday too.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm really, I've met so many great peers and colleagues, and just people who are passionate about these topics as I am. And we're not all geeks. I mean, these are people who are concerned just in general. How do we make from a global defense, how do we improve our lives and make us more safe, whether it be our parents, our family members, we're all in this together. And so I love the debates, but overall what's been the most interesting is the people you get to know in there. So, and I've got to know you over the last few years, Chris, so it's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye-bye.